For centuries, the nation of Wakanda has been protected by a warrior king, an avatar of Bast, the Panther goddess, a champion with supernatural strength and senses obtained from consuming a mythical heart-shaped herb. They are Demisa Sarki, the Black Panther. This isn't just your standard leader. The Black Panther is the spiritual head of Wakanda, essentially making them both the president and pope at the same time. So naturally, the lineage of this mantle is one that goes back centuries. And as a huge fan of the character, I have read way too many issues of this series. So I'm here to break down everyone who has ever held the title of Black Panther, which, by the way, are two words you're going to hear way too often throughout this video. I'm sorry in advance. Now, just as a heads up, I'm only going to be covering the official Black Panthers of Wakanda in this video, not imposters and not Casper Cole, the half-Jewish cop that once took up the mantle with T'Challa's blessing. That whole can of worms is going to get its own video, and trust me, there is plenty enough to cover here without getting into all of that. So, hello and welcome to Comic Drake, where I talk about comic books and my name is Drake. Let's talk about it. But before getting too far into things, I want to give a big thank you to Private Internet Access for supporting today's video. Look, we've all heard about VPNs by now. They help keep your data secure by allowing you to switch over to a different server while browsing the internet. But also, like you guys have heard, you're able to access content that isn't available in your country on streaming services, much like Netflix. And I was just recently in Japan, and let me tell you, there was a lot of stuff that wasn't available until I switched my server back to America. PIA has servers in over 83 countries, so you are absolutely going to be able to find one near you for extremely low latency. Also, they have a server in each of the 50 United States, which is going to be extremely helpful for catching premieres early. Get started today by going to piavpn.com/comicdrake to get 83% off with a complete 30-day money-back guarantee. I also want to give a really big shout out to PIA because there were supposed to be two different sponsors on this video, but because of really bad management, they had to go, and PIA stepped up and was just super easy to work with throughout this entire process. So again, thank you very much. But now, let's get back to the video. The first Black Panther was named Mosi and dates all the way back to 1 million BC. He discovered a quote-unquote vibrating rock and consumed a heart-shaped herb, which gave Mosi the power that he needed to defend his people. See, the vibranium meteor absorbed a bunch of cosmic energy out in space, and when it crash landed on Earth, it radiated said energy, which created a bunch of reality warping portals in the process that brought many, many nasty creatures from across the universe to Earth. These anomalies caught the attention of a prehistoric group of Avengers that recruited Mosi to fight alongside them. We even found out in a one-panel flashback that Mosi was worthy of Mjolnir, the hammer wielded by his teammates and self-described leader of the team, Odin. Yet during a battle with a huge storm of space bugs, Mosi was fatally wounded and died once the dust settled. This loss caused the prehistoric Avengers to disassemble, and for the Wakandans to isolate themselves from the rest of the world. Now, all of that stuff about Mosi was a relatively recent development, because way back in the 70s, a completely different dude was said to be the first Black Panther, Olumo Bashenga. Over the centuries, the reality warps coming from the Vibranium Mound significantly decreased, but around 3300 BC, Olumo, a shaman from the Panther tribe, predicted that a great and devastating storm would erupt from it. Bashenga tried to unite the various Wakandan tribes in hopes that they could brave the oncoming storm together, but his warnings fell on deaf ears. Lo and behold, the storm ended up happening, and it was up to Olumo to save his people. Bashenga climbed the mound, and over the course of days, he channeled the storm into his weapons, a sword and a spear made out of the purest vibranium. When he could no longer take the pain, Bashenga hurled his weapons, discharging the storm into the sky. Bashenga was heralded as the greatest hero in Wakandan history, and they united around him, erecting a city where his weapons landed, and birthing Wakanda as a proper nation. Now, although Mosi might have been the first Black Panther, Bashenga is the most revered out of all of them, and sits at the head of the table of the Wakandan necropolis, the place where all the Black Panthers of the past convene. But what about all of those other dudes at the table? Well, to be honest, we actually don't know all that much about them, but I will tell you what I was able to piece together. So this guy is the mighty Negus, and he was a man of culture. Although he was no stranger to combat, Negus was a much greater fan of drumming, and under his rule, Wakandan art flourished. Out of all of the Black Panthers, Negus lived the longest and was the first king of Wakanda. I would assume that means that he's the one that was responsible for uniting the tribes as opposed to just being the chieftain of the Panther tribe like those before him, but that's just speculation and headcanon. We also know for a fact that he fought in the first Orisha War, and although we don't actually know what that war was, the Orisha is the pantheon of African gods that the Wakandans worship, and they help their people defeat the deadly creatures that existed in the land that would go on to become Wakanda. However, it's incredibly unlikely that that was the Orisha War, considering that Wakanda hadn't been formed yet. And if anything, then it would be Bashenga that would be the one involved, not Negus. It might have even been Mosi. Who knows? If my theory is correct about Negus becoming the first king by uniting the tribes, a war would be the perfect opportunity for that to happen. So Marvel, there you go, that one's free. My personal favorite out of the lesser-known Black Panthers is Mamadou Fall, who may or may not be named after a real-world footballer. He was said to be the fiercest of the Black Panthers, and took the throne from Sentra the Bold, who foolishly declared war on a neighboring country due to manipulation from the Hyena clan. Mamadou was the first Black Panther from the Jabari tribe, and his legacy is why they've never been exiled from Wakanda, despite all of the chaos and hostility that the Jabari have drummed up over the centuries. I really like Mamadou because he's a punch first, ask questions later sort of guy, and is always referring to himself in the third person. If we're comparing the whole gang like the past lives of the Avatar, then Mamadou is basically T'Challa's Kyoshi. The next up is Benhazen. We don't actually know anything about him. But hey, at least he got a name, unlike all of the Panthers that are shown in visions alone and are given zero info. However, we do get to know a little bit about Nahanda, the Black Panther of the Middle Ages, and presumably the first female to boot. She was said by Boss to be the wisest of all the Panthers, and she once teamed up with Thor back in the olden days. But yeah, that's all we know about her, which wraps up all the lesser-known Black Panthers that give counsel to T'Challa in the Necropolis. But take a look at the runtime. There are still plenty more Panthers to talk about. Turkana appears in the Shuri solo comic, where she explains that she was only the Black Panther for 3 months in order to get the strength she needed to save her father and allow him to return to his role as king. Who was her dad? No idea, it was never mentioned. My money is on Takanda, also known as the Wall. We only heard about this guy once in passing, and 100% the only reason that I suspect that he's Turkana's dad is because their names are kind of similar. But speaking of Black Panthers that we know in name only, it's worth mentioning that the major cities of Wakanda are named after notable Black Panthers of the past, such as the aforementioned Bashenga, but also Panthers that I'll be talking about later on, such as T'Chaka, Azuri, sometimes known as Azaria, and Sayan. But there's 2 other major cities, the capital Braganzan and Birinjata, who, based on the naming conventions of these cities, are presumably other Panthers, either of which could be the name of this guy. He's the Black Panther during the 19th century who killed a bunch of would-be colonizers. But alright, let's finally get into the good stuff, the Black Panthers with substantial history. Chanda was the Black Panther during World War II and encountered a Nazi soldier named Fritz Claw, who crash-landed in Wakanda. Chanda welcomed the foreigner as a guest, who took a keen interest in the tribe's sacred metal, which he dubbed Vibranium. Under the guise of trying to repair his plane, Claw spent his time convincing many Wakandans that he was a prophet of Bast, and managed to recruit several to his cause. While Chanda was out on a hunting trip, Claw and his cult took the capital by force, requiring Chanda to run for his life and take refuge in the forest. Without any food, Chanda ate a random heart-shaped herb that he had found, and that also summoned a massive panther. Feeling stronger than ever, Chanda defeated the cat, donned its skin as a new outfit, and returned to his city to send Claw packing. Yeah, this story is claiming that Chanda was the first Black Panther, even though it was firmly established nearly 2 decades ago that Bashenga was the first. You know, before Mosi was later introduced as the real first Black Panther. Look, comics are dumb and complicated, but also none of this really matters because that entire story was wiped away from existence, and now there is a much better dude that was the Black Panther of World War II. I swear to God. Superhero comics are not as complicated as they seem. It's just that the books from the 90s were really fucking terrible. Okay, so back during World War II, Wakanda was simply a myth, sort of like El Dorado and Atlantis. But considering that Prince Namor had just revealed himself to the service world and was fighting for the Allies, anything is possible. This prompted both the Nazis and the Americans to journey out to Africa in hopes of finding the mythical nation and taking its vibranium for themselves in order to build even greater missiles. But unbeknownst to them, Wakanda was guarded by its protector, Azuri the Wise. While the Nazis got Ned Stark, the Americans had a secret weapon, a captain you know and love who's unafraid to step in. Steve and Azuri dueled to a stalemate, which allowed the Americans to be welcomed into Wakanda as guests. But much like the Confederacy before them, the Nazis are a bunch of sore losers. So they went in for round 2, sending in their mech suits and superpowered soldiers, with Cap and Azuri fighting them off with relative ease. As a token of their newfound friendship, Steve gave his original shield to Azuri, and in exchange, the Black Panther gave Cap a small chunk of vibranium, which was later used to forge his new and most iconic shield. Azuri was succeeded by his son T'Chaka, and to go back to that whole mess about the Black Panther of World War II, T'Chaka was said to be the Panther during World War II back in 2001. Look, Marvel's timeline is really wonky because they're constantly having to change their lore back in the day in order to account for that time difference between World War II and today, because Captain America is clearly from World War II, but whatever. T'Chaka was a great leader who devoted a lot of his efforts towards increasing the technological prowess of Wakanda, valuing scientific achievement so much that he took one of the nation's greatest scientists as his wife. Yet, despite being a futurist, T'Chaka still held up the isolationist culture of Wakanda. However, he was significantly less xenophobic and made a couple of controversial moves that irked his subjects. The first was taking in a white child that survived a plane crash, not only adopting him as his son before having a biological heir of his own, but also making him the head of Wakanda's secret police, the Hatu Surhase. One of those. The second was that after the passing of his first wife, T'Chaka married an outsider from South Africa named Ramonda. Unfortunately, T'Chaka was killed by a man named Ulysses Claw, who discovered Wakanda and wanted to take the vibranium for himself. T'Chaka's young son T'Challa tried his best to avenge his father, but only managed to blast off Claw's hand before getting away, sparking a lifelong mission to finish the job. With T'Challa too young to take the throne, T'Chaka's brother Sion was the next in line. But as the younger of the two brothers, Sion never expected that he would ever become the Black Panther, and he was a rather reluctant ruler, essentially just holding down the fort until someone came along that was worthy of taking his place. Which of course brings us to the most famous of all the Black Panthers, T'Challa. While his uncle led the nation, T'Challa traveled the world to train and study Batman style. And when he grew to adulthood, T'Challa brought those skills back home to easily take down his uncle for the throne during the ceremonial challenge, taking his rightful place as the Black Panther. However, Sion continued to help lead the country as one of his nephew's advisors, all while rocking a sick-as-hell suit. As the king, T'Challa was the one that was responsible for finally revealing Wakanda's existence to the rest of the world, and he also used his nation's wealth to help out less fortunate countries, like the United States. Honestly, T'Challa seems to have a huge fascination with the States, and was over there a lot during his time as king, which often left his duties at home completely neglected. He even changed his title for a bit to the Black Leopard in hopes of distancing himself from the American Black Panther Party, which is a little bit fucked up considering how sacred the Black Panther is to Wakanda. But I guess that can be hand-waved away by how that's just the English translation and not Demisa Sarki. Look, that name change only lasted for one issue, but still it feels kind of wrong. During one of his many American adventures, T'Challa was challenged for the throne by his frequent nemesis N'Jadaka, aka Eric Killmonger. The two of them fought for hours on end, ultimately resulting in Killmonger nearly beating the king to death, putting T'Challa in a coma. By the way, get used to people falling into comas because the recent history of Black Panther has more of those than a telenovela. Anyway, hoping to save T'Challa's life, Agent Everett K. Ross stepped in. Because, get this, after a failed coup d'etat, T'Challa was needed back in New York. And since the whole country was shaken up and there was nobody that was both healthy and competent enough to lead, T'Challa made Ross, a man that he had only met like 2 months ago tops, the regent of Wakanda. And for some reason, Ross had to don the Black Panther suit even though that is like not how that would work at all. So yeah, Ross yielded the duel on T'Challa's behalf. And since he was currently in charge of the country, that means that he unknowingly passed the power over to Killmonger 100% legally. Even though Killmonger donned the suit, this by no means actually made him the Black Panther, because the duel against T'Challa was just the beginning, not the end. Though this didn't stop Killmonger from calling himself Black Panther and demanding to join the Avengers despite, being a villain and not actually being a member of the Avengers prior. It's T'Challa, not the title. T'Challa woke up from his coma pretty quickly, but he came out uncharacteristically moody. Like, he didn't even attempt to take back the throne and gave Killmonger his full blessing to be the chieftain, going so far as to waive Eric's requirement to take the rite of ascension. Now, maybe I'm just really bad at reading, but I went through this section multiple times to see if there was anything that I missed, and it's not really clear why T'Challa was acting like this. I mean, maybe it's just because he rightfully predicted that Killmonger was stubborn as hell and wanted to go through the ceremony anyway, which resulted in Killmonger eating the heart-shaped herb, being deemed unworthy by Bast, and falling into a coma, which made T'Challa the chieftain again by default. Which, yeah, this means that Killmonger was never actually a Black Panther, but I thought this whole situation more than earned an honorable mention. Especially because there's that annoying breed of movie-only fans that will do the thing they do in every one of my videos and complain in the comments about how I forgot to mention something, even though the comics are a completely different continuity, and I know what I'm talking about. But anyway, years later, T'Challa fell into a coma, again, because he was in a massive ship crash, prompting his wife, Queen Storm, to nominate his sister Shuri as the next stop, on the grounds that Shuri is of royal descent and has the same training and education as T'Challa. However, when Shuri ate the heart-shaped herb, she was rejected by Bast because she viewed the mantle of Black Panther as a trophy to be won, as opposed to a sacred duty. Which, not gonna lie, that's kind of fucked up considering that, like, that means somewhere in Shuri's heart of hearts, she was like, haha, my brother's dead, I win, I'm in charge. Like it's a Game of Thrones episode. House Panther, what are those? But when a superpowered energy vampire attacked Wakanda, Shuri took the suit and defended her country without any of the enhanced powers from the heart-shaped herb. By doing so, she earned the blessing of Bast, officially making her the Black Panther. Around the same time, a shaman was able to pull T'Challa out of his coma, but since there can only be one Panther at a time, he lost all of his powers. So in order to not feel entirely useless, T'Challa turned to alchemy to enhance his strength, which he used to help fight off Dr. Doom when he invaded Wakanda. After a stint of filling in for Daredevil while Matt was recovering from being taken over by a demon, because comics, T'Challa ventured to Wakanda's City of the Dead to converse with Bast. The goddess blessed T'Challa by making him the King of the Dead, her own personal Black Panther. So not only did he get back all of the physical enhancements that normally come by eating the heart-shaped herb, but now T'Challa has the collective knowledge of every Black Panther before him, kind of like the Avatar. Oh, and also he can control zombies, that's sick as hell. The two Panther siblings ruled together until Wakanda was attacked by a villainous cabal, which resulted in Shuri being encased in a tomb of amber, which is called the Living Death. And yeah, while Shuri was in this coma, that means that T'Challa was both the nation's Black Panther and the King of the Dead at the same time. But even though he was double Panther, this means he still only got the one power boost. During this time, Shuri's soul was in the Dajalia, which is basically the spiritual realm that's made up of Wakanda's collective memory. T'Challa was able to build a machine to pull Shuri's soul back and wake her up, but she was reborn as Aja Adana, the keeper of Wakandan history. So not only is Shuri a walking encyclopedia, but she can also manifest any power from any Wakandan myth, including turning to stone and a flock of ravens. But back to T'Challa. He went off into space in order to find a group of lost astronauts, but crash-landed, got mind-wiped, made into a slave for an evil empire, joined a group of rebels, and became a hero to the masses. What empire was he fighting? Well, the Intergalactic Empire of Wakanda, of course. Let me explain. So remember those astronauts that T'Challa went to go save? So they hit a temporal vortex and were teleported 2,000 years into the past. Unable to return home, the Wakandan astronauts set up a colony, and by using their advanced future technology, they evolved into a mighty empire. In the modern era, the Emperor's ruler is Emperor N'Jadaka, no relation to Killmonger. He's just named that because all the intergalactic Wakandans take their names from ancient history. Now, when I read the comic, I couldn't find any instance of N'Jadaka being referred to as a Black Panther, but he was explicitly stated to be an avatar of Bast, was compared by her to two Black Panthers directly, and Marvel.com refers to him as the Empire's Black Panther. So I guess he counts, and which is why I'm going to talk about him here. As you might have noticed, the Emperor has a cool symbiote suit, which he used alongside his strength from Bast to rule the Empire with an iron fist. I mean not the Iron Fist, but yeah. N'Jadaka turned on Bast and managed to take nearly all of her power for himself, making him so absurdly powerful that the only way that he could be defeated was by the rebels blowing up a planet in his face. However, the Emperor had such a strong bond with the symbiote that he was able to completely dominate it, overwhelming the creature's entire personality and soul with his own presence. Even with their leader gone, the Empire was a force to be reckoned with, and they opened up portals to send their armies to Wakanda Prime back on Earth. But it turns out that the symbiote survived the explosion, and it also went through the portal, finding a new host in the form of Killmonger's dead body. Yeah, Emperor N'Jaka was now merged with the man that he was named after. Now, it's worth noting that with his original physical body dead, all of boss power left the Emperor's body, which means that Killmonger squared over here is no longer the cosmic Black Panther. Not that it matters too much though, because T'Challa killed them both with a spear that was blessed by Bast. And that brings us to the final Black Panther. It's Shuri. Again. See, while T'Challa was off in space, Wakanda felt vulnerable without its protector, so Shuri was asked to take up the mantle once again. She initially refused, but she came back around. While T'Challa was off being a hero to the rebellion, Shuri fought a music-eating bug and got her mind teleported into the body of Groot. Look, I was not a fan of the Shuri solo comic, but I am clearly not the target demographic, and that's fine. It just felt extra off with how wildly different in tone it was from the core Black Panther book that was happening at the exact same time. Anyway, Shuri dropped the mantle once she found out that T'Challa was alive, and at the time of this recording, that is everything. This video took a ton of time and research to put together, so I hope to God that earns a like and a subscribe. I do these deep dives all the time, like the time that I broke down every single Captain America. So maybe give that a watch if you're interested. But anyway, I hope you learned at least a little something new, and hopefully, I'll see you next time.